On today's episode of The Crucible, we got a good one for you. We've got Lloyd Freeman, who you're not only going to hear a little bit about his remarkable career, because quite frankly, it's way too much for me to tell you right now. If you don't know Lloyd Freeman, Google him. But we'll give you a little bit about his remarkable career and also about his Crucible moment and how he has used that moment to adapt and become even more resilient. So we're going to hear a good one today. Lloyd, appreciate you coming through.
Jeff, thank you for having me.
Absolutely, man.
I appreciate the invite.
I'm gonna let the audience know a little bit about you. Like I said, a little bit. I could not even come close to reading the number of awards this man has won. It is a very impressive list of awards, but let's get to it. Lloyd Freeman is Buchanan's Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer, driving the firm's efforts to advance diversity both internally and across the legal industry as a whole. He oversees the firm's Diversity and Inclusion Council, focusing on equitable policies, mentorship, and data-driven strategies for attorney hiring, retention, and advancement. Lloyd also collaborates with clients to meet diversity goals and fosters key partnerships for programs like internships and thought leadership. A recognized thought leader, Lloyd frequently speaks on topics like implicit bias, microaggressions, inclusive leadership, and he hosts a podcast as well called Dimensions of Diversity, which discusses D&I strategies with national experts. Now, outside the firm, Lloyd is just as active, right? He served as the president of the Garden State Bar Association, where he raised $100,000 for scholarships, probably more than $100,000 for scholarships, and advocated for diverse judicial appointments. He founded the Burlington Camden Achievement Foundation, which awarded over $155,000 in scholarships to young men of color. As the past chairman of Big Brother, Big Sister Independence Region, he mentored nearly 4,000 children in the Philadelphia and South Jersey areas. Lloyd's leadership has earned him, as I mentioned, a number of prestigious awards, including most recently the Mel Narrow Excellence in Diversity Award and the Corporate Leadership Award from Philadelphia Business Journal.
You make me sound good, Jeff.
I mean, hey, if you just want to pay me to ride around and just read I'll do it.
I may take you up on that.
There we go. Hey, look, thanks for coming to the Crucible. The concept here is really simple, right?
Yep.
And you know this. Those of us who have achieved in our careers or in our life often end up being put on a pedestal by other folks who look up to us, and of no fault of their own. We've done it to people ourselves, and so I think that the most helpful thing for people, whether they're thinking personally or professionally, is for them sometimes to kind of learn about some of the bumps in the road that might have happened, and so these crucible moments, these tests and severe trials, I find where they've helped us navigate these spaces. I think having a level of vulnerability around our greatest failures or these moments of trial really is the thing that can propel other people forward. And so that's why we're here. So I'll ask you flat out, what for you, Lloyd, has been a crucible moment or your greatest failure?
You know, that is such a tough question, Jeff, because you can't ask a type A person, what is your greatest failure and think that I'm going to be able to, answer it with any level of ease. But there is certainly one that sticks out, and that's how I know that is the right answer to your question. You talked about, these being some gems for individuals, whether it be in their personal life or their professional life. And I think mine is really at the intersection of the two. Plain and simple, I prioritized work over family in a major way. And no one externally ever, told me that I was a failure for doing so. But if I look back, whether it is on, how great I have been as a father, and certainly, how great I was in my career, again, all roads lead to that crucible moment. So to dig into it a bit, I was practicing law full time earlier in my career. And was so 100%, buried into my work because I had this tunnel vision. I wanted to become a partner in a law firm. And, as you already know, that requires you to put in the late nights, the early mornings, the weekends, et cetera, et cetera. And so my wife and I, we actually decided that plus, we kind of wanted to live this lifestyle where we could really enjoy the fruits of our labor for a while, to have kids later on in life. And so, again, still totally fine. When I was 34 years old, That is the year that we got pregnant. That is also the year that I am up for partner. And so you have both of these things happening. Again, you know, you're kind of like the apex of the personal life and the professional life. And as my daughter was born in January, and partner decisions were going to be made about 6 months after that, I did not want to, you know, deviate from, you know, my tunnel vision and my stride toward partnership. And it was as if my daughter was born and Lloyd was nowhere to be found. I will tell you, if I'm not mistaken, my daughter was born on a Tuesday. I may have taken through the end of that week, you know, the days that Ebony was in the hospital. And then after that, I said, all right, here you go. This is your baby. See ya. I got to get back to the office so I can make partner. And again, it was totally driven by the fact that, you know, I had this huge goal that I wanted to accomplish. You know, it was communicated well beforehand. You know, we were on the same page. It wasn't as if, you know, she was like, oh my gosh, you abandoned me, you know, with the kid. So, but again, you have two inexperienced parents, if you will, because this is our first child.
Absolutely. And
we had come up with, you know, this plan as to, okay, well, I'm going to take the baby and I'm going to be off work, and then you go back and do your thing and make partner. You're a parent, and you know that that's just not workable, right? But this is already the thing that we set into motion. And even as I saw some of the things starting to kind of crash and burn by way of, hey, the baby isn't sleeping, or, oh, the first time the baby gets sick, right? Or, you know, there's doctor's appointments. And Jeff, I wasn't there for, I won't say I wasn't there for any of it. I wasn't there for the super majority of it. And again, it was because, well, I want to make sure that, you know, as my daughter learns, you know, what I do for a living, she knows that I'm a partner in a law firm. My daughter doesn't care that I'm a partner in a law firm, right? But you couldn't tell this 34-year-old, you know, partner track lawyer anything but that. And so, you know, kind of just circling back to the end of it, I thought that I could make up for the fact that I was going to be a bit more absent than I should have been by then bringing in the reinforcements, right? So you have my wife who went on maternity leave. Again, I'm at work. And so after she's got to go back to work, you're like, the baby is still super young. We don't want to send her to daycare yet. All right, so we're going to fly in the grandmothers. So then you got my mother-in-law who comes in, and my mother who comes in. I even have my grandmothers come in. Again, I'm putting all these Band-Aids on this problem because I'm thinking, all right, well, this will be a good patch fix for, you know, my absence and what I am not doing. And you don't get a chance to relive or re-experience those first 6 months of having a child. And again, I you know, I want to give kudos to Ebony. She never made me feel like, you know, what I was doing was negligent. You know, my mother didn't make me, or my mother-in-law didn't. She didn't communicate it to me, at least, that I was negligent in any fashion. But what I can say, though, is that, you know, once I then ultimately made partner some 6 months later, and I look back around, you know, what are some of the sacrifices that it took for me to get here? And I don't really care about, you know, missing the sleep. I don't really care about missing, you know, going out and hanging out with friends. But, ooh, those 6 months with my daughter, like, what was I thinking? What was I thinking? So that was my crucible moment. I mean, I'm sure you'll probably later ask me, you know, how did I recover from that? But
I'm gonna ask you that right now.
Oh, you're gonna ask?
Yeah, why not? Like, because here's the thing, and I'll give you. So you're right. I definitely understand this. So we had our children while I was in law school. Which was, you know, looking back,
a glutton for punishment.
I was working, right? So, you know, I was working full time, and then Tanice was. We had both kids while I was in law school at night, so I was never around. And I when you talk about that 34-year-old on that track, I identify with it because we had a conversation, and this was a way for us to move forward. It wasn't like I was just up in one day, I'm gonna go to law school today. Like, you know, so we had that conversation, but then, you know, there's a struggle that's happening in the home at that time that you're not aware of, right? And it's not because you're trying to be correct.
You know,
like
there's no malintent, you know, with it. Correct.
You're like you said, your tunnel vision.
I'm the
on
provider.
Your thing. Yeah, you're like, hey, I'm a provider. I got to do this. You're at home, and that's what you got. And then we don't, because I didn't either. We don't weave that necessary connection the way we're supposed to, especially early on, like with the first child. It's just like, because you have no idea.
Yeah. Where was the training manual? Like, where was the orientation? I missed that.
Like, I think it's under the bed, like under the bed in the hospital. And the doctors
in the hospital.
They don't like to bend down after they deliver the child to pull a training manual. So you just got to know it's there and get it. But if you don't, which most people don't.
That's it. You got to know the rules of the game.
There you go. So tell me, like, how did you recover?
So it's funny. Our kids are 4 years apart, and I think that one of the reasons why they are 4 years apart is because I was still grappling with, and let me be very vulnerable here and let you know that I was grappling with it internally. I mean, there were no people that I was going to and saying, hey, I am feeling like, I dropped the ball on this. You know, guys don't ordinarily do that. And then, of course, my career, right? It's like picking up, taking off. I mean, things are happening. So I didn't really have time to really tap into that self-care, if you will, to really be able to chat about it with other people and get some level of guidance or, advice around how I can and should navigate it. But I will tell you that certainly as we were starting to have conversation around, okay, should we have a second? By this point, again, I've been partner for a number of years now, and I've actually taken on this more hybrid role. So I'm now partner and chief diversity officer in the firm. And so as you full well know, I mean, there are now some of these policies that I get a chance to really be able to put my imprimatur on, right? And so one of the first policies that I put into place, and this is while Ebony is pregnant, was I introduced this parental leave that was applicable to everyone in the law firm, irrespective of your gender. And so it applied to every individual, whether you were the person who was bearing the child, whether you were the the other parent, whether you were the conceiving via surrogate or adoption. It didn't matter. I mean, you get this leave, and everyone's leave is created equal. But you know the stigma associated with a guy who is going to take some level of parental leave. And so here I am, I've got this like superhero cape on, right? Because I'm the chief diversity officer and that's what we do. And so I am advocating on behalf of, these individuals who I'm trying to pull from my crucible moment, if you will. I already have lived through this. Like I am telling you all, like you should take some time and be there with your family. And so I introduced this, this new leave, and probably 2 weeks after that is when Bo was born. And so nobody has ever, tapped into this new gender neutral parental leave. And here I am, someone who's on the leadership team, and I have been espousing all of these, hey, this is a good thing for everyone to do. And I said, well, I'm already a partner. I've already got this chief title. I've already got the clients, and I got to do this.
Who better to do it
and to set the standard? And so I did it in a big way. After Ebony finished taking her parental leave, right after she left, we're not flying in grandmothers this time, I came in. And so this now becomes, January of 2020, I think it's right after the holidays, I go out. Jeff, I took 12 weeks. I took 3 months. I said, I'm going to be there. And Ebony was like, well, do you want to overlap a little bit of that with my leave? So basically so I can teach you what to do. And I go, no. Because, I'm sure in my head there was some level of, I want to make up for what I didn't do the first time. But I also needed to experience it. And I think for me to have this wholesome parenting experience, like I needed to know what it was like to be the only person there and, the kid has a blowout. And I needed to know how to do that. And so I did it. And, Bo and I, that was my road dog. I mean, so we took 3 months, and it was he and I, and, we did the Starbucks runs, and we went to the mall just so we can get some fresh air and get some steps in. And I took him to the doctor's appointments. And I mean, I was the, quote, primary parent, if you will, for those 3 months. And so even so much so, because Ebony was back at work, I said, I'm going to be the one who gets up middle of the night. Doesn't matter, if he is crying or whatever. I just really wanted to take that on. So I made a point of, putting him in the stroller and taking him into the law firm 2 or 3 times, because I needed everyone to really change, what is, my mindset around parental leave and whether or not this is acceptable. They needed to see someone who was in a leadership role, who had made it to where I had made it, and who said, I don't care about the titles. My most important title was dad.
That's
had to bring them in, had to make sure I was the first person who took the leave. And I mean, it was a ripple effect. I mean, every guy who had a kid after that was like, what? I'm taking the Lloyd leave.
I'm
taking the Lloyd leave.
They changed the name of it. I love it. Oh man! So first of all, you're making me look really bad in front of my wife. But I hope she doesn't watch this podcast. But we already know that that's not true.
Yeah, that's totally gonna happen.
But the other thing I think is, I love the idea of setting that example for others. Yeah. We find like in leadership roles, oftentimes, especially those of us who are in position to help. Not only create policy, but then make sure that policy is followed through.
Yep.
A lot of times, young people, they need this. They need to see that.
They do.
Right? Because it's one thing for something to be on paper, and it's another thing for the leadership to act it out.
That's it.
And a lot of the work you do in that diversity space is really about, like, we want to change behaviors and mindsets. And so in order to do that, we can't just create policy. We got to create it, and then we got to model it.
That's it. And the way I look at it is, at some point you have to take the words on the paper and you have to find out how are we going to have a personification of this policy. And so to your point, it takes someone who is going to be that person who's going to model the behavior, that person who is going to then, change all the, stigma that is associated with this particular role. But then also I think that it is just super important for everyone to be able to have a benchmark. You know what? Lloyd can do it and can still be successful, can still have the clients, so I can do it too. Yeah. And that's empowering.
Yeah.
And that is what, to your point, I think that a generation of professionals, we don't need to put a gender on it or race on it. You need some level of empowerment because, you're navigating this thing fresh, just like I was.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you don't have to make that same mistake.
I love that, man. And that is a crucible moment that a lot of people can and will come across
for sure.
Right? Like there is there's not only the stigma from a father's standpoint. There's not only the stigma of it's I think parental leave before these policies started coming into play was it wasn't even really, they didn't even call it parental leave.
No, maternity leave, just so we're clear.
Yeah,
it was directed
leave.
to the mother.
And then dads would get 2 days.
Yep.
Right? Like you're the day your baby's born, you should be there. And, and maybe when it gets home. And then we'll see you back at the home.
That's it.
Yeah. And so, that stigma is a heavy one to push against. And especially if you're a younger father, right? To the point we were just making, the fact that you had already been successful in the firm made it even more. So let me ask this: how, I think you already gave it, but I'm gonna ask you to summarize it. For the young person watching the podcast, it's but that's not gonna work in where I work. What would you advise? What would you advise that person to do when they're confronted with this particular moment?
Well, you have to think about how you're defining your work. Mm-hmm. So what is your job? And, people are multidimensional. Yeah. And, there are commas associated with your title. Mm-hmm. You are not an attorney, hard stop. You are not a podcast host, hard stop. No, you're a podcast host and a dad and a husband and a son and the provider and, and all the things, right? And so you can tap into each of those roles that you play, and I think that the intersection of all of those, that is your superpower. And so for me, if I am looking at a person who's coming up in their career and they're thinking, oh, well, that's not going to work for me because of my role. Well, you're only thinking about one of the roles that you have, and so quit thinking about this kind of monolithic view of who you are. People are complex. And we mean a lot to a lot of people, and you need to make sure that the way in which you are exhibiting your behaviors in your personal life, your professional life, those aren't two different people. You're one person, but you have many roles.
I love that, man. I think that it's literally it's an even broader view of the intersectionality, right?
Yep.
So it's a very poignant point. Last question for you, Lloyd. Actually, I'm gonna pull one. Actually, how about that? What's the? I mean, I think that was kind of the long-term advice you would give, but understanding the impact that your Crucible moment had on you.
Yes.
What other advice would you offer to folks to embrace a moment like that? Because I think the thing The thing for me that I love most about Crucible moments, obviously you don't love them when you're in them. They're horrible.
And certainly not
Right?
when you're right after when you're making the reflecting
it's
moment.
Always months, years later, you look back and you go, oh, that's why this happened, right? Like it happened because it shaped this particular piece of me. And so you recovered from it, right? When, you had that moment when Ailey was born, and then you recovered leading in the boat. And I think it was a graceful recovery, because I did not recover. I did not.
But you know what? It was because I had that position, right? And so I wonder, right? What would the story have been if I was just another one of the partners in the firm?
100%. There are privileges to leadership.
Absolutely, there are. And I recognize that.
Yeah, and sometimes, we have to recognize there's a privilege to leadership and mention out loud to folks, like, there's a privilege to leadership, but this should not be a privilege.
That's it.
Right? This should not be a privilege.
Yep.
So how would you tell people to move forward from their Crucible moments in general? Not just that one, but how would you tell folks to move forward? Like, you're going to hit these Crucible moments. They're going to come. What happens when you hit them?
The Crucible moment is going to come. You can't prepare for it. But my ultimate advice is to give yourself some grace. We are not perfect. We are humans. Life is hard. If I could throw in a little bit of a euphemism, I mean, life be lifing. And when life is lifing, I mean, you're going to have to, take with it all of the punches and, all the scars and all the wounds, kind of as they are inflicted upon you. But again, it's about that recovery. It's about making sure that, you're always better than you were before. And so again, if you're giving yourself that level of grace, you're not beating yourself up because you made a mistake or because you failed. I mean, you're just thinking about how am I failing up? And so how am I going to ensure that when I am faced with this Crucible moment again, that I act differently?
I love it. Lloyd, appreciate you, brother. Thanks for coming in. Again, there you have it. You're going to hit these Crucible moments. I love the idea of failing up.
Yes.
And really kind of tapping into that failure and figuring out what lessons there were in that failure. Keep in mind that your learning and your adjustment from that failure will not happen immediately. Usually it is reflective, but when you're in that moment, make sure you recognize it's just a moment, it will pass, and the next time it comes around, you'll be well prepared. Thanks again for stopping by on The Crucible. God bless.
Thanks so much for watching this episode of The Crucible with Jeff Marshall. If you would like to be a guest on the program, let's be in touch. And be sure to stay connected with us through your favorite platforms. The Crucible with Jeff Marshall is part of the A Live Podcast Network and can be found in audio-only format wherever you listen to your podcasts.